the Wolfless Omega, sat alone at the mating ceremony. The Alpha King said, "Pretend you're my mate." "They're taking bets," Victorine sneered, leaning close so her voice cut through the ballroom chatter. 5 gold coins says you'll run crying before the first shift. Seraphine stared into her wine, refusing to meet her half-sister's glowing amber eyes. "Let them bet. At least someone will profit from my misery." "Don't be dramatic, Fine. You aren't miserable. You're just defective." Victorine smoothed her silk gown. "Stay in the shadows, and don't look at the king. He prefers his meat with a bite." "I'm just waiting for midnight to disappear," Seraphine murmured. "Good," Victorine whispered, her smile sharp. "Because in a room of predators, the silent ones are eaten first." The grand hall of the Northern Territory was a cavern of obsidian and gold, designed to amplify the growls and whimpers of the shifting elite. Tonight, under the blood moon, the air was thick enough to choke on, saturated with the scents of cedar, musk, rain, and arousal. It was the mating ceremony, the primal gala where biology superseded politics and the wolf inside the human took the reins. For everyone except Seraphine Whitwell. Seraphine sat on a velvet-tufted bench in the furthest shadow of the room, a ghost at a feast for the living. At 22, she was an anomaly, a biological error. She was an Omega by bloodline, born to a high-ranking family, but her wolf had never woken. She was wolfless. In a society that worshipped the duality of man and beast, she was considered half a soul. She couldn't shift. She couldn't mind link. And worst of all, she couldn't smell the intricate chemical language that dictated their hierarchy. To her, the room just smelled like sweat and expensive perfume. Across the polished marble floor, the dance was beginning. Not a waltz, but the hunt. Young alphas circled the room, their eyes glowing with predatory light. Omegas preened, flashing their necks, releasing distinct pheromones that Seraphine could only identify by the way the alphas reacted. Pupils dilating, nostrils flaring. "Look at her." A whisper drifted from a nearby cluster of debutantes. "Why did the Whitwells even bring her? It's like bringing a mannequin to a war." "Charity," another giggled. "Or punishment." Seraphine took a sip of the bitter wine, letting the insults slide off her like rain on glass. She was used to it. Her stepmother, Odalina Crowhurst, had made sure Seraphine knew her place since she was a child. "You are the vessel that arrived empty, Seraphine," Odalina would say, while brushing Victorine's hair. Pretty packaging, but nothing inside. Victorine Elmshaw, her half-sister, was currently the center of attention. Victorine was a perfect Luna candidate, fierce, beautiful, and possessing a wolf so volatile it snapped at flies. She was currently holding court near the orchestra, laughing loudly, her gaze darting toward the massive double doors at the head of the hall. Everyone was looking at those doors. Everyone was waiting for him. Garrick Thornhaven, the Alpha King, the scourge of the East, the man who had united the warring packs, not with diplomacy, but by tearing the throats out of anyone who dissented. Rumors swirled around him like smoke. They said he was cursed. They said his wolf was too big for his human form, that it was slowly consuming him. They said he needed a mate tonight, or the Council of Elders would force him to abdicate in favor of his cousin, Edgar Brightfall. Seraphine shifted uncomfortably. The politics of the crown meant nothing to her. She just wanted to go home, lock her door, and read her books, the only place where being human wasn't a sin. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors groaned open. The music died instantly. The chatter ceased. The silence was absolute, heavy and terrified. Garrick Thornhaven entered. He didn't stride, he prowled. He was taller than the stories claimed, broad-shouldered in a tuxedo that looked like it was straining to contain him. His hair was the color of midnight, swept back from a face that was devastatingly sharp. High cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes of piercing glacial blue. But it was his energy that changed the room. Even Seraphine, who was deaf to the wolf spirit, felt the static charge in the air. It was the pressure of a storm about to break. Behind him walked his entourage, including his advisor, Edwin Silverhall, a man with spectacles and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Garrick didn't look at the line of hopeful she-wolves preening in the center of the room. He didn't look at Victorine, who had arched her back to accentuate her figure. He looked bored. Lethally, violently bored. He descended the stairs, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. He was heading for the bar, but the path took him past the shadowed alcove where Seraphine sat. She held her breath. Don't look up. Be the furniture. Be the shadow. She stared at her shoes. She felt the vibration of his footsteps approach. She expected him to walk past, to ignore the broken thing in the corner. The footsteps stopped. A pair of polished black dress shoes halted directly in her line of vision. The silence in the hall stretched, agonizing and confused. Why was the king stopping by the wolfless girl? Was he going to mock her? Banish her? Seraphine slowly lifted her chin. Up past the tailored suit, past the silk tie, up to the face of the most dangerous man on the continent. Garrick was looking down at her. His expression wasn't one of disgust nor desire. It was calculation. He looked at her the way a general looks at a map, assessing terrain. "You're not scared," he said. His voice was a deep baritone, rough like gravel grinding under a boot. Seraphine blinked. "I'm terrified, Your Majesty. I just lack the wolf to howl about it." A ripple of gasps went through the room. One did not speak to the Alpha King with such dry wit. Garrick's eyes narrowed. He leaned down, placing one hand on the wall behind her head, effectively boxing her in. The scent of him, ozone, cold steel, and pine, washed over her. It was overwhelming, but not because of magic. It was just him. "You're the Whitwell girl," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "The empty one?" "The wolfless one," she corrected, her heart hammering against her ribs despite her calm facade. "If you've come to inspect the defect, feel free. But I'm afraid I don't shift. I don't purr, and I certainly don't mate." Garrick studied her face, searching for something. He looked at the court, watching them, the hungry eyes of the council members, the jealous glare of Victorine, the calculating stare of Edwin Silverhall. "They want me to pick a queen tonight," Garrick said, his voice a vibration against her skin. "If I don't, they'll force a political match on me by dawn, a spy in my bed, someone who answers to the council, not to me." "A tragedy," Seraphine deadpanned. "My heart bleeds for your political inconvenience." The corner of Garrick's mouth twitched. A smile? No. A smirk of triumph. "You have nothing," he said. "No wolf, no status, no future in this pack except as a burden to your family. I can see the way they look at you. Is there a point to this cruelty, Your Majesty?" "The point," Garrick whispered, leaning his ear close to her lips, creating an illusion of intimacy that made the ballroom explode with whispers, "is that you are the only woman in this room who can't be bought by my pheromones. You're immune to the Alpha command, and that makes you useful." He pulled back slightly, locking eyes with her. "Pretend you're my mate," he commanded softly. "Play the part. Save me from the council tonight, and I will give you the one thing you've never had." Seraphine frowned, her curiosity piqued against her will. "And what is that?" "Freedom," Garrick said. I'll give you enough gold to leave this pack, leave this continent, and live where no one cares if you have a wolf or not. 6 months. That's all I need." Seraphine looked at Victorine, who looked ready to kill. She looked at Odalina, who looked stunned. She looked at the exit doors, so far away. Then she looked at the king. He was offering a deal with the devil. But he was right. She was drowning here. "I don't know how to be a Luna," she whispered. "Good," Garrick replied, straightening up and offering her his hand. "I don't want a Luna. I want an accomplice." Seraphine placed her hand in his. It was warm, calloused, and engulfed hers completely. Garrick pulled her to her feet, turning to face the shocked assembly. He didn't smile. He just pulled her flush against his side, his arm possessively around her waist. "The search is over," Garrick announced, his voice booming through the hall. "I have found her." The drive to the Obsidian Palace was silent, save for the hum of the engine and the rain lashing against the tinted windows of the limousine. Seraphine sat as far away from Garrick as the leather interior allowed. She was still wearing her ball gown, though the hem was damp from the run to the car. The exit from the ball had been chaotic, cameras flashing, wolves howling in confusion, Victorine screaming something that sounded suspiciously like a curse. Garrick had ignored it all. He had marched Seraphine out with the efficiency of a soldier extracting a high-value asset. Now, in the quiet of the car, the adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. "You're shaking," Garrick noted. He didn't look at her. He was scrolling through messages on a tablet, the blue light illuminating his harsh features. "I just lied to the entire Northern Territory," Seraphine said, hugging her arms around herself. "And not just the territory, the Council of Elders. They execute people for false mating claims, Garrick." He paused, his finger hovering over the screen. It was the first time she had used his name without a title. He didn't correct her. "They execute people who get caught," he said calmly. "You won't get caught, unless you plan on telling someone." "Who would I tell?" she scoffed. "My stepmother? She'd sell me for a new chandelier. My sister? She'd skin me alive. Exactly why I chose you." Garrick set the tablet down and finally looked at her. "You are isolated. Isolation breeds loyalty, or at least desperation. Is that what this is? Desperation? On my part, calculated risk. On yours, survival." The car turned onto a gravel road, winding up the steep cliffs toward the fortress that overlooked the city. The Obsidian Palace was less a home and more a weapon carved from black stone. "Here are the rules," Garrick said, his tone shifting to business. 1. We share the royal suite, but not the bed. There is a connecting room. You sleep there. "Relief is washing over me," Seraphine muttered. 2. Public displays only. Hand-holding, the occasional scent marking. I'll have to rub my scent on your clothes, so you smell like me. It will fool the noses of the weaker wolves. Seraphine felt a flush rise to her cheeks. Scent marking was an intimate act, usually reserved for lovers. And the stronger wolves? They will be suspicious, Garrick admitted, especially Edwin Silverhall. He's my chief strategist, but he reports to the council. He wants me to mate with a female from the southern pack to secure a trade route. He will be watching you for any slip-up. If he suspects we aren't truly mated, he will expose us. And if he exposes us, then I lose my crown, Garrick said, his eyes hardening into ice. And you lose your head. Seraphine stared at him. The car hit a bump, and their shoulders brushed. He felt like a furnace. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why go to these lengths? Why not just pick Victorine? She's powerful, she's eager, she's a puppet," Garrick cut her off. "They are all puppets. If I mate with a wolf chosen by the council, or the social hierarchy, I hand them the keys to my kingdom. They will use the mate bond to manipulate me. But you, he gestured to her, you are a void in their world. They can't mind link with you. They can't overwhelm you with alpha commands. You are the only person in my court who is truly private. I need a blind spot. The car came to a halt in the courtyard. Guards in tactical gear swarmed the vehicle, opening the doors. "Welcome home, my love," Garrick said dryly. "Try not to trip." As they exited, the wind whipped Seraphine's hair across her face. The palace loomed above, a monstrosity of Gothic architecture. Standing at the top of the grand stairs was a welcoming committee, and at the front of it was Edwin Silverhall. Edwin was a slender man, elegant in a way that suggested a hidden blade. He bowed as they approached, but his eyes behind his spectacles were sharp, dissecting Seraphine down to the molecular level. "Your Majesty," Edwin purred, and the Lady Seraphine. This was an unexpected development. "Fate is rarely expected, Edwin," Garrick said, placing a hand on the small of Seraphine's back. The heat of his palm burned through the silk of her dress. "Indeed," Edwin smiled. He stepped closer to Seraphine, invading her personal space. He took a deep breath, inhaling her scent, or rather, the lack of it. "It is fascinating," Edwin murmured. "I smell nothing on her. No wolf, no power, just human." He looked at Garrick. "Are you certain, sire? The bond usually demands a match of strength." "Her strength is different," Garrick said, his voice dropping an octave, a warning growl vibrating in his chest. "And she is mine. Questioning her is questioning me." Edwin stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender. "Of course. I will have the royal suite prepared immediately. I assume you'll want the consummation privacy protocols in place?" Seraphine choked on air. "Yes," Garrick said without missing a beat. "We are not to be disturbed until noon tomorrow." "Very well." Edwin bowed low. "Welcome to the snake pit, my lady." The royal suite was larger than Seraphine's entire childhood home. It was a masterpiece of masculine luxury. Dark wood, heavy furs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the storm-tossed ocean. As soon as the heavy double doors clicked shut and the lock engaged, Garrick released her. He strode to a sideboard and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a glass, downing it in one swallow. He loosened his tie, tearing it off and throwing it onto a chair. The transformation from doting mate to exhausted king was instantaneous. "The bathroom is through the left door. The wardrobe has been stocked with things that aren't... whatever that is." He gestured vaguely at her dress. "Your room is on the right." Seraphine stood in the center of the room, feeling incredibly small. "You're good at this," she said. "Lying." Garrick paused, his back to her. He braced his hands on the sideboard, his head hanging low. For a second, she saw the tension in his shoulders, the weight of 1,000 expectations. "I've been king since I was 15, Seraphine. My life is a performance." He turned around, his eyes tired. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow, the interrogation begins." Morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Seraphine woke to the sound of banging on the outer doors. She scrambled out of the plush bed in the guest room, no, her room, and grabbed a silk robe. She rushed into the main suite just as Garrick emerged from the bathroom, a towel slung low around his hips, water dripping from his dark hair. Seraphine froze. The man was carved from granite. Scars crisscrossed his torso, claw marks, burn marks, the history of his violent reign written on his skin. He was terrifyingly magnificent. Garrick didn't seem to notice her staring. He gestured to the door. "It's the maids, breakfast, and likely Edwin snooping." He walked over to her. "Stand still." "What?" "I need to scent you. Now." Before she could protest, Garrick stepped into her personal space. He grabbed the lapels of her robe and pulled her close. He didn't kiss her. Instead, he buried his face in the crook of her neck, rubbing his cheek and jaw against her skin, right over her pulse point. His stubble grazed her sensitive skin. His breath was hot. He made a low sound in his throat, a rumble that wasn't quite human. It sent a shock wave of electricity down her spine that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with biology. He pulled back, his eyes dark. There. Now you smell like you belong to me. Seraphine's heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. She couldn't speak. She just nodded. Garrick opened the door. A parade of servants entered, carrying trays of fruit, cured meats, and pastries. Edwin Silverhall followed them in, holding a stack of documents. "Good morning," Edwin chirped, his eyes darting immediately to the disheveled bed in the main room, which Garrick had messied up purposely, and then to Seraphine's flushed face. "Edwin," Garrick growled, grabbing a shirt, "it's 7 a.m. The kingdom doesn't sleep, sire, and neither does the gossip." Edwin placed the papers on the table. "The council is in an uproar. A wolfless queen. They are calling it a pollution of the bloodline. They demand a test." "A test?" Seraphine asked, finding her voice. Edwin turned to her, his smile razor-sharp. "The trial of the hunt. Tradition dictates that a new queen must run with the pack in her wolf form to prove she can keep up." "She has no wolf form," Garrick said, buttoning his shirt. "She is exempt." "Ah, but the law says if she cannot shift, she must prove her worth in another way," Edwin countered. "She must survive the labyrinth." Seraphine felt the blood drain from her face. The labyrinth was an ancient ruin on the edge of the estate. It was filled with traps, both magical and mechanical. "No," Garrick slammed his hand on the table. "I forbid it." "If you forbid it, you admit she is weak," Edwin said softly. "And if she is weak, she cannot be queen. The council will annul the union by sunset." Garrick looked ready to tear Edwin's throat out. His hands curled into claws. Seraphine stepped forward. She realized with sudden clarity that this was the first test. If she hid behind Garrick now, she was dead weight. If she wanted that freedom, that gold, she had to earn it. She didn't have claws. She didn't have magic. But she had spent 22 years reading every book in the royal archives while her sister was out partying. She knew history. She knew mechanics. She knew puzzles. "I'll do it," Seraphine said. Garrick whipped his head around. "You will die." "I won't." She looked him in the eye. The labyrinth was built by the third Alpha King, who was known for his love of logic puzzles, not brute strength. "It's not a test of muscle, Garrick. It's a test of mind. And that," she looked at Edwin, smiling coldly, "is something I have plenty of." Edwin's smile faltered for the first time. "Excellent," Edwin said, though he looked disappointed. "Noon. The garden. Don't be late." He swept out of the room. When the door closed, Garrick turned on her. "Are you insane?" "Probably," Seraphine admitted, her hands trembling again now that the bravado was gone. "But we have a deal, Garrick. You protect me from the wolves. I protect you from the council. I'm holding up my end." Garrick stared at her for a long moment. The anger in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by grudging respect. "If you die in there," he said, moving to the window to look out at the grey sky, "I'm going to be very annoyed." "I'll try not to inconvenience you," she replied. But as she looked at his back, she realized the game had changed. She wasn't just a prop anymore. She was a player, and for the first time in her life, the wolfless girl was about to step into the arena. The entrance to the labyrinth was a gaping maw of ivy-choked stone, standing silent in the palace gardens. A crowd had gathered, courtiers, council members, and of course Edwin Silverhall, who looked like a man ready to deliver a eulogy. Garrick stood at the edge of the dais, his jaw tight. He couldn't interfere. Tradition bound him as tightly as chains. If he stepped in, he invalidated Seraphine's claim to the throne. Seraphine stood before the archway. She had changed into trousers and a fitted tunic, her hair braided back. She looked small against the ancient masonry, but her spine was steel. "The rules are simple," Edwin announced, his voice carrying over the wind. "Reach the center, retrieve the moonstone, return before the sun sets. Fail to return, and the labyrinth keeps you." Seraphine didn't look at the crowd. She looked at Garrick. He gave her a single, imperceptible nod. Survive. She stepped into the shadows. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air temperature dropped 20 degrees. The sounds of the garden, the birds, the whispers, vanished, replaced by the grinding of stone gears deep beneath the earth. This wasn't a garden maze. It was a machine. The first corridor was narrow, the walls lined with statues of weeping wolves. Seraphine walked cautiously, counting her steps. The third king loved logic, she reminded herself. He hated brute force. She came to a fork. To the left, a path paved with gold. To the right, a path of jagged, broken slate. A wolf would choose the gold, the path of dominance. But Seraphine knelt, examining the floor. The gold tiles were pristine, too clean. The slate showed wear, faint scratches, dust patterns. "The humble path," she whispered. She stepped onto the jagged slate. Behind her, a massive stone block slammed down onto the gold path, crushing the space where a traveler would have stood. Seraphine let out a shaky breath. One down. Deeper she went. The trials became more complex. A room filled with water that only drained when she solved a riddle carved into the ceiling in an archaic dialect. Thankfully, one she had studied in the dusty back rooms of the library. A corridor of mirrors that reflected not her face, but her deepest insecurities. Victorine laughing, her father turning away, Garrick looking at her with pity. She shattered the mirror, showing Garrick with a heavy stone. "He doesn't pity me," she said to the silence. "He needs me." The illusion broke, revealing the exit. But the final test was the center. She emerged into a circular courtyard. In the middle, on a pedestal, glowed the moonstone. But guarding it was a mechanism of nightmares, a clockwork wolf, twice the size of a real beast made of iron and gears. Its eyes burned with magical fire. It growled, the sound of metal grinding on metal. Seraphine froze. She had no weapon. She couldn't fight this. The machine lunged. Seraphine threw herself to the side, rolling across the stone floor as iron claws sparked against the pavement where her head had been. She scrambled up, backing away. The wolf circled her. It was programmed to hunt movement and aggression. "Logic!" she screamed internally. "Find the pattern!" She watched the wolf. It ticked. Every 3 seconds, a gear in its chest exposed a small, glowing crystal. Its power source. But it was only visible when the wolf roared. She had to make it roar. Seraphine grabbed a handful of gravel. "Hey, over here, you rust bucket!" She threw the stones. They clattered harmlessly off its metal snout. The machine stopped. It turned its head, eyes narrowing. Then it opened its jaws to unleash a sonic blast. Now. Seraphine didn't run away. She ran at it. As the jaws opened and the chest plate slid back, she pulled a heavy iron pin from her hair. The only sharp object she had. She slid under the beast's lunging paws and jammed the pin directly into the glowing crystal in its chest. The machine shrieked, a sound of tearing metal. Sparks showered down on her, burning her tunic. The light in its eyes died. The heavy iron hulk collapsed, inches from crushing her legs. Silence returned to the labyrinth. Seraphine lay on her back, gasping for air, her face smeared with grease and soot. She stood up on trembling legs, walked to the pedestal, and took the moonstone. It was cold in her hand. "Checkmate," she whispered. The doors to the royal suite flew open. Garrick didn't walk in. He stormed in. Seraphine was sitting on the edge of the bathtub, trying to clean a long, shallow gash on her arm with a damp cloth. She had returned victorious, dropping the moonstone into Edwin's shocked hand before collapsing. Garrick had carried her the rest of the way, snarling at anyone who tried to help. "Leave it," Garrick ordered, kicking the door shut. He crossed the room in 2 strides and snatched the cloth from her hand. "I can do it myself," Seraphine winced as he inspected the wound. "You are shaking so hard you're going to stab yourself," Garrick muttered. His anger was palpable, vibrating off him in waves of heat. But his hands, his large, lethal hands, were incredibly gentle as he dabbed the antiseptic on her skin. "I won," she said softly. "You almost died," Garrick countered, his voice tight. "I felt it. When that thing fell, I felt the fear spike in the bond." Seraphine looked up, confused. "The bond? We don't have a bond. It's fake." Garrick paused. He looked at her, his blue eyes swirling with a storm of emotion she couldn't pass. He didn't answer. He just focused on bandaging her arm. "Why are you so angry?" she asked. "I did exactly what you hired me to do. I secured your throne for another day." "I am angry," Garrick said, tying off the bandage and finally meeting her gaze, "because for the first time in 10 years, the noise in my head stopped while you were in there. All I could hear was you." "The noise?" Garrick sighed, sitting back on his heels. He looked exhausted. "The curse. It isn't just a story, Seraphine. The Alpha bloodline carries a madness. The voices of the pack, the demands of the ancestors, the primal instinct to kill, it never shuts off. It's a constant roar in my mind. That's why I'm violent. That's why I'm dangerous. It's too loud." He reached out, his fingers hovering inches from her face. "But you," he whispered. "You are silence. You are the only quiet thing in my world. When I'm near you, the roaring stops. It's like standing in the eye of a hurricane." Seraphine's breath hitched. She had spent her whole life thinking her lack of a wolf was a defect, a void. But to him, her void was a sanctuary. "So I'm your mute button?" She tried to joke, but her voice trembled. Garrick smiled, a genuine crooked thing that transformed his face. "You are my peace." The atmosphere in the bathroom shifted. The air grew heavy, charged with a tension that wasn't about survival anymore. Garrick leaned in, his gaze dropping to her lips. Seraphine didn't pull away. She wanted to know what that silence felt like for him. She wanted to be the one who gave it to him. A sharp knock on the bedroom door shattered the moment. Garrick pulled back instantly, the mask of the king slamming back into place. But for a second, he looked regretful. "Enter!" he barked. It was a servant, eyes wide with fear. "Your Majesty." "My lady, the Queen Mother. She has arrived. She wishes to dine with the happy couple tonight." Garrick went rigid. "My mother is in exile." "She was," the servant stammered, "until Councilman Silverhall invited her back to meet your new mate." Garrick looked at Seraphine. "Odalina is a kitten compared to my mother." "Get dressed, Seraphine. The real war just started. The dining hall was a battlefield set with fine china." Queen Mother Helena sat at the head of the table, a woman of withered beauty and eyes like flint. She had been exiled for attempting to overthrow Garrick 5 years ago, claiming he was too unstable to rule. Now she was back, slicing into her steak with surgical precision. Victorine and Odalina were there too, looking smug. Edwin Silverhall sat to Helena's right, sipping wine. "So," Helena said, her voice like dry leaves, "this is the creature, the empty vessel." "Her name is Seraphine," Garrick said, his hand resting heavily on the table. He hadn't touched his food. "Seraphine," Helena tested the name. "A pretty name for a genetic dead end. Tell me, girl, how do you intend to give the king an heir? If you cannot shift, your womb is likely as barren as your spirit." Seraphine felt Garrick's wolf rise. The table shook slightly. She placed a calming hand on his forearm. His muscles were rock hard. "Biology is strange, Your Majesty," Seraphine said coolly, taking a sip of wine. "Sometimes the strongest trees grow from the quietest soil. Besides, Garrick has enough wolf for both of us. Perhaps he needs a human influence to ensure his children don't eat the nanny." Victorine choked on her water. Garrick hid a smirk behind his goblet. Helena's eyes narrowed. "Sharp tongue. Pity it's your only weapon." "I survived the labyrinth," Seraphine reminded her. "I believe that counts as a weapon." "The labyrinth is a toy," Helena scoffed. "Politics, my dear, is the true slaughterhouse." The dinner dragged on, a series of veiled insults and probing questions about their mating. Seraphine parried them all, using her wit as a shield. She played the role of the adoring yet independent mate perfectly. But as the dessert was served, Seraphine excused herself to the powder room. She needed a moment to breathe. She navigated the hallways, but instead of heading to the guest restroom, she took a wrong turn down a service corridor. She heard voices drifting from a slightly ajar door. The library. "Too stable," a voice hissed. It was Helena. "It is temporary," Edwin's voice replied, calm and oily. "The girl is a novelty, a sedative. But she cannot last. The poison is slow, but it accelerates when he shifts. If we can provoke a shift, a violent one, the madness will take him fully. The council will have no choice but to put him down." Seraphine pressed herself against the stone wall, her heart stopping. "Poison?" "And the girl?" Helena asked. "Collateral damage," Edwin said. "When he snaps, he will likely tear her apart first. It will be a poetic tragedy. The beast kills beauty. Then we crown Edgar." Seraphine clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. They weren't just trying to get Garrick abdicated. They were trying to turn him into a monster so they could justify killing him. And they were using her as the bait. She backed away slowly, her shoes making no sound on the carpet. She had to tell him. She turned the corner and ran straight into a solid wall of muscle. She looked up, terrified, expecting a guard. It was Edgar Brightfall, Garrick's cousin, the man who would be king. Edgar was handsome in a soft, non-threatening way, with sandy hair and kind eyes. He caught her by the elbows to steady her. "Lady Seraphine," he smiled. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I got lost," Seraphine lied, her pulse thundering in her ears. Edgar studied her face. He glanced down the hall toward the library, then back at her. His smile didn't falter, but his grip on her elbows tightened just slightly. "These halls are dangerous for the uninitiated," Edgar whispered. "You should be careful where you walk. You never know what you might overhear." He let her go. "Go back to the king, Seraphine, before he worries." Seraphine fled. She burst back into the dining hall, pale and breathless. Garrick looked up instantly, sensing her distress. He stood up, knocking his chair back. "What is it?" he demanded, ignoring the room. Seraphine looked at Helena, who was smiling over her wine glass. She looked at Edwin, who watched her with predatory amusement. She couldn't say it here. Not in front of them. "I'm tired," Seraphine said, grabbing Garrick's hand. "Take me upstairs, please." Garrick didn't ask questions. He saw the genuine fear in her eyes. He swept her out of the room, leaving the vipers to their feast. As soon as they were in the safety of the suite, Garrick locked the door. "Who touched you?" "No one," Seraphine gasped. "Garrick, it's not a curse." "What?" "The madness, the noise in your head." She grabbed his lapels, pulling him down to her level. "It's not just biology. They're poisoning you." Garrick went still. "Explain." "I heard Edwin and your mother. There's something they're giving you. Something that reacts when you shift. They want you to lose control. They want you to kill me." Garrick's face went blank, a terrifying mask of cold rage. "Kill you?" "They want a tragedy," she said urgently. "They want the beast to kill the beauty so they can put Edgar on the throne." Garrick turned away, pacing the room like a caged animal. "Edgar. I always thought he was weak, but not a traitor." "He saw me in the hall," Seraphine said. "He knows I know." Garrick stopped. He looked at the moon outside the window, then back at Seraphine. The fake arrangement had just disintegrated. This was life or death now. "Then we have to leave," Garrick said. "Tonight." "Leave! You're the king! You can't run!" "I'm not running," Garrick growled. "I'm hunting. If I stay here, I'm playing their game by their rules. I need to get the poison out of my system, and I need to find out where it's coming from. We're going to the Silver Mountains, to the one place Edwin's spies can't follow." "Where?" "My grandfather's hunting lodge. It's off the grid." He walked over to her, grabbing her face in his hands. "Pack a bag, Seraphine. No gowns. Only things you can run in." "Garrick," she whispered, leaning into his touch despite herself. "If we leave, everyone will think we're eloping." "Let them," Garrick said, his thumb brushing her lip. "Let them think we're so lost in lust, we abandoned the kingdom. It's the perfect cover." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "Besides," he murmured, "I'm starting to think the acting is the hardest part of this deal." Seraphine's heart slammed against her ribs. "We have a contract, Garrick. 6 months. Screw the contract," the king whispered. Then he pulled away, the moment shattering into urgency. 5 minutes, Seraphine. Be ready." As Seraphine ran to her room to pack, she realized the terrifying truth. She wasn't just pretending to be his mate anymore. She was the only thing standing between the king and his execution. And the worst part? She wasn't doing it for the gold anymore. She was doing it for him. The Silver Mountains were not merely a geographical location. They were a fortress of ice and silence. The royal hunting lodge, buried waist-deep in snow, was the only source of warmth for miles. Inside, the fire roared, but Garrick was freezing. He lay on the rug before the hearth, his body convulsing. The poison was leaving his system, but it was fighting every inch of the way. His skin burned to the touch, and his eyes, when they flickered open, were almost entirely black, the wolf fighting for dominance against the chemical shackles. Seraphine knelt beside him, wringing out a cold cloth in a basin of snowmelt. Her hands were raw, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. They had been here for 3 days, 3 days of him screaming in his sleep, 3 days of her whispering stories to keep him anchored. "Garrick," she whispered, pressing the cloth to his fevered forehead. "Stay with me. Don't listen to the noise." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. His claws were partially extended, digging into her skin, but she didn't flinch. "Run!" he rasped, his voice sounding like grinding stones. "The wolf! It's too big, Seraphine. It wants to hunt. It wants blood. It can't have mine," she said firmly. "I'm not on the menu, Your Majesty." Garrick let out a choked laugh that turned into a groan. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her palm. Why is it quiet? He mumbled. Even now, when the madness is loudest, when you touch me, it stops. Maybe your wolf isn't mad, Seraphine said softly, stroking his sweat-dampened hair. Maybe it's just lonely. Maybe it's been screaming for someone who can't hear it, so it doesn't have to compete. Garrick looked up at her, clarity piercing the haze. The legend of the Null, he whispered. I thought it was a myth, an omega born without a wolf, designed by the moon goddess to be the mate of an alpha whose power is too great for a shifter to handle. Only a vessel of pure silence can hold a storm. Seraphine's heart skipped a beat. I'm not a legend, Garrick. I'm just the girl nobody wanted. I want you, he said, the admission stripping away the last of the artifice. I don't want the silence, Seraphine. I want you. The woman who beat a mechanical wolf with a hairpin. The woman who lied to a kingdom to save a stranger. He sat up slowly, his movements fluid despite the pain. The firelight danced on the planes of his chest. He reached out, tracing the line of her jaw. The contract is void, he murmured. No more pretending. He kissed her. It wasn't the chaste, performative peck of the ballroom. It was a collision. It was desperate, terrifying, and overwhelmingly tender. For Seraphine, who had never known the supernatural pull of a mate bond, this was something more real. It was choice. He was choosing her, wolf or no wolf. But as the kiss deepened, the air in the cabin shifted. The silence of the mountain was broken. A howl cut through the night, then another. Garrick tore away, his eyes flashing gold. He stood up, stumbling slightly before finding his footing. They found us, he growled. Who? Not spies, Garrick said, sniffing the air. Mercenaries, rogue wolves. Edwin must have hired the Shadow Pack. They don't want to capture me, Seraphine. They're here to finish the job. The lodge was surrounded. Shadows moved against the snow, massive, hulking shapes with eyes like burning coals. There are too many, Seraphine said, peering through the shutter slats. She saw at least 20 wolves circling the perimeter. Garrick was putting on his boots, his movements sharp and lethal. The fever had broken, replaced by cold combat focus. I'll draw them off. You take the snowmobile in the shed. Head for the border. No, Seraphine said, grabbing a fire poker. We stick to the plan. You're the muscle, I'm the brains. This isn't a puzzle, Seraphine. This is a slaughter. Exactly. So let's change the odds. She looked at him, her eyes fierce. Can you shift? Garrick hesitated. If I shift now, with the poison withdrawal, I might not come back. I might kill everyone, including you. I'll take that chance, she said. But we need a bottleneck. The cellar. Before Garrick could argue, the front door exploded inward. Splinters of wood rained down as a massive grey wolf leaped into the room, jaws snapping. Garrick didn't even shift. He caught the wolf in midair, human hands grappling with fur and muscle, and threw the beast into the fireplace. Go, he roared. They sprinted for the cellar door. Seraphine yanked it open, and they tumbled down the wooden stairs just as 3 more wolves poured into the cabin. Seraphine slammed the heavy oak trapdoor and threw the bolt. It wouldn't hold them for long. The cellar leads to the old mines, Garrick said, the darkness of the underground pressing in. But it's a maze. Good, Seraphine said, grabbing an old lantern from a hook. I like mazes. They moved through the damp tunnels, the sound of claws tearing at the trapdoor fading behind them. But they weren't alone. The Shadow Pack knew these mountains. As they emerged into a large cavern, they stopped. Blocking the exit was a man in a pristine white coat. Edwin Silverhall. He wasn't alone. Flanking him were Victorine and Edgar. Victorine looked gleeful. Edgar looked sick. A valiant effort, Edwin's voice echoed off the cave walls. But did you really think you could hide from the resources of the crown? Garrick stepped in front of Seraphine. Edwin, I should have ripped your head off years ago. You were always too sentimental, sire, Edwin sighed. And now look at you, hiding in a hole with a defective girl. He gestured to his men. Kill the king. Make it look like a bear attack. Leave the girl to Victorine. Victorine shifted, her bones cracking as she transformed into a sleek, russet wolf. She snarled at Seraphine. Edgar, Garrick shouted, is this what you want? To rule a kingdom built on murder? Edgar flinched. He looked at the gun in his hand. Then he looked at Edwin. Do it, Edgar, Edwin commanded. Shoot him, and the throne is yours. Edgar raised the gun. His hand was shaking. He aimed at Garrick's chest. Seraphine stepped out from behind Garrick. Don't shoot him, she said calmly. Shoot Edwin. Edwin laughed. Oh, precious thing, he doesn't have the spine. He doesn't need a spine, Seraphine said, her voice echoing with a strange, harmonic authority. He just needs to know the truth. Edwin has been poisoning the king for 5 years, Edgar. But did you know he's been poisoning you too? Edwin froze. What lies? Why do you think you've never found a mate, Edgar? Seraphine pressed, bluffing with every ounce of confidence she had. Why are you always weak? Sickness? Or is Edwin keeping you pliable? A puppet king needs puppet strings. Edgar lowered the gun slightly, looking at Edwin with dawning horror. She lies, Edwin screamed. Kill them, Victorine lunged. Garrick, now, Seraphine shouted. Garrick didn't hesitate. He surrendered to the roar. The sound of his shift was like a thunderclap. Bones realigned, muscle expanded, and where a man once stood, a monster appeared. Garrick's wolf was enormous, midnight black, standing nearly 7 feet at the shoulder. His eyes were burning gold. He didn't just look like an alpha, he looked like a god of war. He swatted Victorine out of the air with one paw, sending her crashing into the rock wall. She didn't get up. The mercenaries hesitated. This wasn't a normal wolf. This was the true king. Garrick let out a roar that shook stalactites from the ceiling. The shadow pack broke. Instinct overrode orders. You do not fight an apex predator. They turned and fled. Only Edwin remained, his face pale, and Edgar still holding the gun. Garrick turned his massive head toward Edwin. He snarled, saliva dripping from fangs the size of daggers. He took a step forward, ready to tear the advisor apart. No! Seraphine yelled. Garrick stopped, his ears twitching. He looked at her, growling low in his chest. The madness was there. She could see it in the dilated pupils. He wanted blood. Seraphine walked toward him. Garrick, look at me. The giant wolf lowered his head, snapping his jaws inches from her face. Don't, Edgar whispered, terrified. He'll kill you. Seraphine ignored him. She reached out and placed her hand flat on the wolf's muzzle. Silence, she commanded softly. The effect was instantaneous. The growl died in Garrick's throat. His eyes cleared, the black receding to reveal the blue iris. He leaned into her touch, whimpering like a pup. Seraphine looked at Edgar. He's not a monster, Edgar. He's just a man who was betrayed. Edgar turned to Edwin. The advisor was backing away. Edgar, wait. We can discuss. No more discussions, Edgar said. He didn't shoot Edwin. He simply holstered his gun and pointed to the exit. You're under arrest, Edwin, for treason. The return to the capital was not a quiet affair. Garrick, back in human form, but wearing the grim resolve of an executioner, walked into the council chamber with Seraphine at his right hand and Edgar at his left. Edwin Silverhall was dragged in chains behind them. The council of elders who had been preparing for a funeral sat in stunned silence. "You wanted a show," Garrick announced, his voice booming. "Here it is." He threw a stack of documents onto the round table, papers Seraphine had found in Edwin's coat pocket in the cave, ledgers of poison purchases, payments to mercenaries, letters discussing the assassination. "Your chief strategist," Garrick said, "tried to kill your king." The elders read the papers, their faces turning grey. "But the girl," one elder stammered, pointing at Seraphine. "She is wolfless. She cannot be queen. The law states the queen must be the Alpha's equal," Garrick interrupted. He looked at Seraphine. She wore no crown. She wore simple travelling clothes, stained with mud and soot, but she stood with her chin high, meeting the gaze of every powerful wolf in the room without flinching. "She walked into the labyrinth and survived," Garrick said. "She walked into a den of traitors and talked them down. She stood before my wolf in its maddest state and tamed it with a touch." He stepped closer to the table. "She does not need a wolf to be strong. She has something none of you possess. She has humanity. She has mercy. And she has my heart." Garrick turned to Seraphine, ignoring the gasps. He took her hand. "I, Garrick Thornhaven, Alpha of the Northern Territory, reject the Council's selection process. I claim Seraphine Whitwell as my true mate, not by biology, not by pheromones, but by choice." He knelt. The king knelt. "Will you have me, Seraphine? Broken curse and all?" Seraphine looked at the man who had offered her freedom, only to give her a kingdom. She looked at the council, who were watching with bated breath. "I'll take the curse," she said, her voice ringing clear. "But the crown, we're going to have to redesign it. It's a bit heavy." Garrick laughed, rising to kiss her. The sound of the council erupting into arguments faded into the background. It didn't matter. They had already won. The laws of the land were reformed 6 months on, ending the exclusion of those without wolves, and instead utilizing their unique silence in roles like strategy and medicine. Seraphine never shifted. She never grew claws or howled at the moon. But when she walked through the obsidian palace, heads bowed lower than they ever had for any shifter queen. She was the calm in the center of the storm, the anchor that kept the Alpha King from drifting into madness. They sat together on the balcony, watching the first snow of winter fall over a kingdom that was finally at peace. "You know," Garrick said, wrapping his arm around her, "Edwin still owes me 5 gold coins. Why? He bet I'd eat you within a week." Seraphine smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Technically, you're the one who got consumed, Your Majesty." "Completely," he agreed. Love, they realized, wasn't about finding the person who matched your growl. It was about finding the one who could hear your silence. Did this story make your heart race? If you enjoyed the journey of Seraphine and Garrick, please like this story, share it with your pack, and subscribe for more tales of romance, rebellion, and the magic of the human heart.